Nothing in this recording is intended as investment advice, and the people in this recording may hold positions in the companies they talk about. Do not make any investment based solely on a tip or recommendation. Please do your own research.
Hello and welcome. Today I'm joined by Steve Brown, who is a CEO at Orcadian. How are you today, Steve?
Very good to see you, Zach. How are you?
I'm very well. We haven't spoken for a long time, which I'm not taking personally. I know that you're a busy man, and we can tell that from today's announcement that your company's put out, which has a bit of gas in it.
A bit of gas, a bit of electrical power, and something that I didn't realize was a noun, compute. So what we've done today is we've announced what we really think we're going to be able to do with our gas field in the southern North Sea. So we have a license over a field. It's called Earlham. It's actually named after a village in Norwich. Earlham Hall is a beautiful building. Anyway, it's called Earlham. It's got 114 BCF of gas in it. There's another field with another 31 BCF of gas. Lots of gas that needs to be monetized. We've talked about monetizing this in the past, and we've always talked about the concept of having an offshore power station to generate electricity offshore and to send that electricity to the grid. The thing that's new today is that we want to put a third platform next to our gas platform and our power station platform, and that's going to be an offshore data center. It's not going to be the first offshore data center in the UK. It's probably going to be the second. Microsoft actually back in 2018 put a bunch of cabinets into a pod and sunk them off the Orkney Islands to see how data centers could perform subsea. Very interesting little experiment. They found out some interesting things which the offshore oil industry had known since 1980. So one of the things they found was if you fill the atmosphere of that pod with nitrogen, because of the lack of oxygen, you get fewer failures. In 1980, every subsea control module was filled with nitrogen for exactly the same reason. So we think the offshore industry has a huge amount to bring to the people who want to build data centers. And we think offshore is actually the best place to build those data centers. First of all, you put them next to your power supply. So you're not draining the grid. You're not putting stress on the grid. You've got a dedicated electrical supply. The second thing is you're miles from anyone. You're in nobody's backyard. Nobody has to hear these data centers grinding away or whatever. So all that NIMBYism is out the window. And the third thing is cooling these data centers proves to be a pretty big issue. If you're in the middle of the southern North Sea in 40 meters of water, you're sitting on top of the biggest heat sink you can imagine. So that whole facility cooling issue becomes pretty trivial. So we definitely think offshore is the best place to be doing data centers. And we also think it takes oil and gas and actually people who've been working in the wind industry, offshore people, to know how best to take a data center from the onshore to the offshore. So your image of a data center is probably like 3,000 acres and massive buildings spread over a whole big area. And that goes back to the cloud era of computing, when a typical data rack, so imagine a rack in a data center, 19-inch rack with all the servers plugged into it, that would use maybe 10 kilowatts of power. NVIDIA, who seem to have something to do with these data centers, NVIDIA want to increase that to 1 megawatt per rack. So that's 100 times of the power density. Now, the industry is not quite there yet, but obviously taking something from onshore to offshore is a lot easier if the rack can produce 100 times as much compute as it used to do in the past. So we think that taking data centers offshore is actually the right answer. And we think the UK is uniquely well positioned to do that because we've got not just me, but great people in the industry who know how to do things, to marinize things, make it complex industrial processes compact. And we think we can move the UK from being a bit of a laggard in AI to actually being right at the front.
Right, so this is where I come in, and a couple of points. The first one is that we have a Labour government, and we'll have a new Prime Minister of a Labour government. The last 10 years or so, both Labour and Conservative have managed to close down the North Sea. Labour, in particular, wants to close down any source of entrepreneurship or clever ideas or anything else that might make the country richer or help people financially. And so you fit right into that, that even if your data center in the middle of the North Sea doesn't affect anyone, they don't like it being there. And they don't like you trying to find gas because they'd rather buy gas from the Russians or whoever else we're in a conflict with. So um, it's how do you address that issue?
Oh,
And
absolutely, Zach. You're almost as cynical as I am, but you're not. You're not quite as cynical as I am. I'm the most cynical person on the planet. Um, this is a project even Ed Miliband's gonna love because not only are we planning to produce some gas, which he doesn't really like, but we're planning to capture almost every drop of CO2 that's produced in the combustion processes that generate the electricity. And then we'll take that CO2 and re-inject it back into the Earlham reservoir. And we do that because it'll actually give pressure support and push the rest of the gas out. But as a side effect, we're making this a very low scope 3 emissions project. And uh, I believe any Labour minister will want to support this project because it's making use of our own resources, it's providing employment for people in the UK, it's generating power that we're desperately short of, and we're doing it in such a way that because we'd be islanded from the national grid, we add no stress to the people at NISO and DESNES and Ofgem and so on. We add no stress to them. We sort it all out ourselves. If they don't love this project, then God help us.
well, I think maybe a time to get slightly religious. The other thing in terms of Orcadian is that you're making these big infrastructure noises and gas noises and everything else. That's not a rude way of speaking about it, but you've got a market cap of 10 million at the moment. How much can you deliver on these excellent sounding plans?
So you put your finger on something that I would like to have a few words on. Not only do we have this gas project, but we've got roughly just under 200 million barrel of 2C contingent resources. 13.6 million of those barrels are carried all the way to first oil. The market places virtually no value on these resources. Praise be to God, we get a new energy secretary who wants to approve the Jackdaw and Rosebank projects and open up the floodgates because there is a pile of projects waiting behind those two um, that will restart developments in the UK. So praise be to God that happens. So I think our market cap is ridiculous for our oil assets. For our gas assets, it's actually quite interesting. You can take our gas assets, the 145 BCF of gas, and you can compare it to the price at which uh, uh, Deltic was sold to Neonex Plus. That's a deal that's in the market. It's almost closed. And if you look at those numbers, what it's saying is, roughly speaking, the value of our gas asset ought to be around £30 million. So we think our current market cap is completely disconnected from either the value of the oil assets or the value of the gas assets. And that's before we start talking about the concept of building an offshore grid and actually expanding that grid, because we think we could build it to gigawatt scale. And that's why we call it the Earlham Gigagrid. But actually, the way we want to take this project forward is not by diluting all our Orcadian shareholders, who include me by uh, 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 as well. We want to bring new investors in at what I call the Earlham Gigagrid level. So a new special purpose company which will contain the gas license and which will contain the plans to build the power station and the data center. And we're looking for new investors to come in at that level because, this is the oil and gas business, and the raw material of the oil and gas business is money. And it's very hard to do things without a bit of money. We spend very little, but you have to spend some.
All right, well, that sounds pretty comprehensive. But let's see how you deliver. I presume there'll be plenty of news flow from today to add to what we've got.
Absolutely. We're working on a number of different initiatives that will flow from that. We absolutely have our fingers crossed that we will get investors in at that Earlham Gigagrid level, at which point we'll be able to push ahead with the concept select process that we talked about in this process. And the other thing to say about this is people in the States have been spending a lot of money to develop opportunities to build data centers. And there's a really good analyst called Rob West at Thunderset Energy. And no one can use this metric I'm about to give you to make an estimate of what I think our strategy is worth, because we've got no metrics against that. But I can tell you how much it costs people who want to develop sites that you could put a data center onto, and how much they've been able to sell these sites to the hyperscalers and the neoscalers. And Rob has done this analysis. He's looked at 20 different projects. They've gone and bought some agricultural land at a nice premium. They've typically invested in some transmission and distribution cables and some. So typically they spent about $25 million to set up a 500 megawatt data center site, and they've been able to sell that for $250 million, which is a good return. That's like a 10 times uplift on their investment. And that works out at about 50 cents a megawatt. So we think our market cap is off by in three areas. It's off by miles for our oil assets. It's off by miles for our gas assets. And it doesn't give us anything for this new strategy we have, which we do think will be valuable. Who knows if it's 50 cents a megawatt? It'll be what it is. But we think it's a really valuable strategy.
Well, we look forward to it delivering or being delivered. In the meantime, Steve Brown, CEO at Orcadian, thank you very much indeed.
As always, a pleasure, Zach.
Thank you for listening. Remember to visit our website for more news and other podcasts at www.share-talk.com.